You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I'm joined, as always, by your co-host, Kevin. Alex, unfortunately, not going to be able to make it with us tonight. He's doing that whole live thing, doing some moving, all that kind of good stuff. Good luck on the move, Alex, and hopefully we'll get you back here next week, right as we get ready to kick into the season. But Kevin, how we doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. So we got through week 0 of the college football season, and now we have some real college football heading our direction this weekend. So super excited about that. Long weekend, get to hang out with the family, do a lot of drafting this weekend as we kind of wrap up summer and head into the boys of fall, if you will. So I'm loving it, man. This is my favorite time of year, and I am just so stoked that we're getting into football season, right? We are here, all the talking, the strategizing, the drafting, the comparing notes and asking questions and everything else. Like, we are on the cusp of kicking off the season, and so now it's time. If you're waiting to do last minute drafts, I'm in the middle of 2. I'm in the middle of 2, and I still have 3 to go. And then we're down to it. We are in the home stretch, and we are ready to go, man. So I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. You're right. This is the time of year where the rubber meets the road on this one. And for everybody out there that's, saying my draft's already done, things like that, I do feel sorry for you. This is kind of one of those things that, and we'll talk about this. We got a whole segment lined up on this, but this is one of the things that, we always kind of tell folks is draft as late as possible going into your fantasy football season. So if you can do it on the very last weekend, right before things kick off, that's going to be your best bet. I know a lot of folks went out and drafted this last weekend, before the 53-man rosters were even set in, and you saw some cuts made, some surprising cuts to some folks that may have drafted a few guys here and there. You obviously had some other news coming out over the weekend as well that is going to shake things up from the fantasy world as well. So that's kind of one of the things we preach here at the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast is to draft as late as possible. That's kind of one of the draft strategies there for you. But we'll get to that here in just a minute. Before we do, make sure that you're hitting us up on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm sure I'm probably forgetting one of them on there at Good Old Boys FF. You can find the link right down there, or the tag right down there, and we are available, all of those. One of the best ways to support this independent podcast, head over to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, and thanks to everybody out there going out and watching all of the the player profile videos that we've put together. And we spent a lot of work over the summer doing that for y'all, getting those cut up, getting those things ready so that you can take those into your draft, take those, getting ready to do your research, all of that kind of stuff, and help you prepare for that one. You guys have definitely we've been seeing the backside of that one and the analytics on that, and can tell y'all are watching it. Just want to say thank you very much for everybody taking the time out of their day to help us help you try and get those cash and trophies here as we head into the end of draft season here. And a big thank you out there to everyone else as well that has subscribed. We just went over the 500 subscriber mark on the YouTube as well. So thank you very much. Again, that's one of the best ways to support this independent podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Let's keep marching towards that 1,000 mark and see what we can do on getting there. But Kevin, let's go ahead and start talking about some draft strategies there, right? Like, we just kind of teed up one of them, talked about, draft as late as possible as a strategy for your league. But let's start trying to dive in a little bit deeper for how individuals can go about this one and really bring home their draft day.
Right on. So I think first and foremost, I know we've talked about this the past couple weeks. Draft strategy that I strongly encourage is making sure you have your tiers, right? Have your drafting tiers set in place. So that way you know how to pivot appropriately, not only between players in a certain position group, if that's what you're hunting for, but also players within kind of your big board, right? Understand the guys that you like and that you don't like. One of the other things that is nice to implement, especially if you're on the ends towards the bookends, is understanding how to read the room and read the physical draft board, right? As players are being picked off and being assigned to teams, understanding how to read that room. And so what I'm meaning by this is, as you start to form your team, right, you kind of have a strategy in place, you kind of know what you're going after, understand what's going on specifically with the 3 teams in front of you and the 3 teams behind you, right? And what this does is, if you're paying super close attention to them, you can read the room. You can kind of tell where they're going. And what this helps you do when combining it with a tier-based draft system, right, is it allows you to take calculated risks on guys that you might have rated the same and you can't quite make a decision, right? So if you're debating between a wide receiver and a running back in a certain spot, right, you're picking 9th overall, right? So you're picking 9th overall, you're in the 5th round. So it's coming down to you, and you're debating between wide receiver and running back. The couple teams in front of you are pretty wide receiver heavy, if you will, and the teams behind you are maybe running back heavy, right? So you're kind of split between the two, and on the turns, it helps you understand where they're going to go, right? It makes sense. It makes clear sense. And I know, I'm sure some folks are thinking, oh, you're just talking down to me. It's not that, but you'd be surprised what people forget in the middle of a draft when they're so focused on their team and their roster and their guy that they want. And so as it's coming up into you, if you know the teams that are drafting directly after you, right, especially that turn, right, if they are running back heavy and you're on the clock and you're debating between wide receiver and running back, it's safe or a calculated risk to assume if there's a wide receiver that you have ranked about the same as your running back, that is the position that you want to draft, right? You know the guys behind you, because they're running back heavy, are going to be looking at wide receiver to balance out their roster. Beat them to the run. It's just a mini run, right? We're not talking, the whole thing, but it does beat them to the mini run. So maybe you're able to get your hands on a Michael Pittman. Maybe, grab Michael Pittman, and then it forces them to look at other players. Maybe they're forced to looking at Terry McLaurin or Deontay Johnson or DK Metcalf or something like that, a guy that maybe you don't like as much. But as they're forcing their way through receiver because they didn't balance themselves out earlier in the draft, the running back that you wanted all along ends up coming back to you because they're forcing themselves in receiver to stay balanced or to stay in the run, so that way they don't have fear of missing out, right? FOMO is a real deal in fantasy football drafts. And so it's just little things like that, little games that you can play with the room and try and dictate how the draft will go in your little area of it. Now, it's a lot harder when you're picking, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, it's harder to do that. But if you're going 1 through 4 or 9 through 12 in traditional 12-team leagues, it's a lot easier to understand kind of how that's going to work for you. So just a little bit of a strategy, just a way to have that edge and try and dictate how the draft is going to fall to you.
I like it. Mine is very kind of simplistic in nature, right? Like, again, this is one of those that when it comes down to being able to implement a strategy, and when it comes down to being able to take somebody's advice for a strategy, right? Like, I know a lot of folks out there look for these, things that you need flow charts and you need, all sorts of different waypoints and all of this other stuff to try and understand, because they think that more complex is better. It's not. Stick to what you know when it comes to the fantasy football, right? Like, there's a lot of this out there that people always try and gravitate towards the new flashy thing or some new strategy that they read up on, things like that. But what I will tell you is that the folks that came up with those strategies, they have done that strategy at minimum 10 to 15 times before they're out there telling other people about it, right? And that's on a minimum. That's on a low end side, right? If Kevin and I are coming at you and telling you that, hey, this strategy works and we're coming at it from that angle, you can bet you that we've probably drafted that way 50 times before we're talking about it in a manner that, we're trying to showcase how that strategy can work, right? So you hear a lot of things out there about zero RB and hero RB, or zero wide receiver, or late quarterback, or late tight end, or whatever, right? Like, if you've never done that before, right? Like, the main league, the league that your home league, whatever that is not necessarily the place to try and implement something brand new on draft night, right? Like Kevin just said, right? Like, know the room, know the board, know how to read those things. And if you're trying to figure out how to implement a new strategy, some of that just kind of goes out the window because you get so locked into how you have to try and focus this on how somebody else laid this thing out. Like, that's not necessarily going to work for you, right? Stick to what you know. Don't go for the new flashy. Do a lot of your own research on this one, right? So one of those that, a lot of folks, they read one thing and that's it, right? Because one analyst said that. What I will tell you is that every analyst has some sort of bias when it comes into it, right? Like, regardless of regardless of how well we try and pull out any bias that we have, some of those things do creep in there. And they do show up here. So one of those that, sure, go out there, get the opinions, look at what folks are out there saying and writing, but do your own research on top of that to either kind of validate that point that you're liking, or to say, hey, maybe I need to look at this from a different angle. But regardless of what it is, right, do your research and kind of stick to what you know there a little bit. Do not go in to your draft trying something that you've never tried before, because a lot of times when you try that, you are going to have difficulty pulling that one off. And, it's a lot like you're trying a new strategy is a lot like trying to draft without tiers. It will end in tears at the end of that draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of piggybacking off of what you're saying is the best strategy overall, and this takes in combination with what Derek was saying what I'm trying to say is you have to be flexible, right? Like, you have to be able to adjust on the fly. And if you are dead set in one of these strategies that you hear any analyst kind of hammering the table for, and their description of it doesn't fall perfectly into your hands, right? And it's not something that you're familiar with, you get put on tilt right away, right? And that's the worst thing that can happen is, you go in and within the first 5 or 6 rounds, you feel like your strategy is just blown up and through the window. And now you're getting frustrated with what's coming to you because you don't have the ability to be fluid with the situations.
Right.
Not all of this is perfect, guys, right? And you just have to remain flexible and understand it's okay to take what the board gives you as long as you're building the roster in whole to fill your team, right? You don't need the 5th wide receiver in the 6th round. I'm not saying do that, right? But as you're building it, be realistic and be calculated when taking risks on players.
Absolutely, right? And that's all of the things that we tell you is to help you avoid tilt on draft day. And that is avoiding the tilt, right? Like, oftentimes will help you lead to having a very successful draft, right? You're never going, and for everybody out there that goes, man, I got to win draft. I can tell you right now that I have had many, many drafts where you run it through whatever calculator or ranker or whatever that it is, and it comes out and says you had the best draft in this thing, and grades it as an A+ or 98 out of 100 or whatever that those things are, because each one of them does it a little bit different. But at the end of the day, those teams that I typically score really high on, if I keep that roster all the way through, it will not tend to lead toward championships, right? Like, you've got to be able, right? Like, you're setting up this roster to realistically get through at least the first 4, maybe 5 weeks of the season. Because when you look at fantasy football, you want to really look at this thing as almost quarters to it, right? You want to look at the first quarter, weeks 1 through 4, 5 through 9, 10 through 13, 14 through 17 type of thing, right? Like, and you kind of break it up in that way, or however your playoffs, right, start, right? Some playoffs start week 15, some playoffs start week 14. That's going to be your final quarter there, right? So, like, you've got to go out and you've got to make just like any other real game, real sport. You've got to make adjustments as you go along through that. And the draft is simply to get you set up, ready to go, ready to win in the fourth quarter, and be able to have a good strategy in place for second, third, and fourth quarters, and be able to really bring that home through roster acquisitions, through trades, things like that throughout the season to help bring that thing in place. Any other thoughts here on some draft strategies?
No, I mean, this is definitely something that we could go on and on about, right? And maybe, we make a note next year, we really dive into some of the different ones to help articulate how this works out. But, a lot of it, make sure you understand the scoring and the rules of the league, right? There's a reason that tight end premiums are kind of becoming a thing now. So make sure if you step into a league, you understand, does it have a tight end premium? Is it something where I need, or you feel like it would benefit your team? Maybe not need, but it would benefit your team to grab one of those top tier tight ends early. Or if you are more comfortable with running someone more in the middle of the pack or towards the end, and you're comfortable streaming tight ends all the time. So it's just one example, but again, understanding scoring to go along with all this is a big component, because you would be surprised the number of people who step into drafts and have very little knowledge of how the scoring system works. Like, they just want to know, do quarterbacks get 6 points or 4 points? Is it half point or full point PPR? And, how many players do I need to draft?
Speaking of which, the 4 point versus 6 point thing has never made sense to me. Like, I get that a lot of times leagues do that to want to balance out the scoring and bring the passing touchdown to 4 touchdowns, but yet the rushing touchdowns are still 6. And so you get cheat code guys anyway, like the Lamar Jacksons, to go out there and just absolutely just go ham when it comes to fantasy points there. But you're going to, while you're not necessarily penalizing, you're almost penalizing away guys that sit back in the pocket and throw a lot of touchdowns by only having their touchdowns count for 4 versus 6. Like, that's one of those that I'm not a fan of it, not a proponent of it. If you're going to have a touchdown be worth 6 points for everybody else, have a touchdown be worth 6 points for a quarterback. Who cares if they score a few more points? There's a reason that they're considered their most important position in sports. Let it be so in fantasy football. And unless you're doing a Superflex, quarterbacks are typically drafted late anyway. So, this is not one of those things that you're really going out there and really shaking things up by having it as a 4 point versus 6 point. You're not really bringing the scoring down to average that much when it's all said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the middle of one right now, and we are, I guess, in the beginning third of the 8th round. Kyler Murray's still on the board. Right? I mean, there's been 6 quarterbacks taken so far, and Kyler Murray's still sitting there. So think of your list after that, right? Kyler, Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Trey Lance, like all these guys. Single quarterback leagues, I see no point in spending a pick in the top 6 rounds, definitely, and possibly even the top 8 or 9 on a quarterback.
No, and you think about it from the same point that Ryan Tannehill routinely sneaks in for 6 or 7 touchdowns a year on the ground, but only throws 20 of them. He will outscore a bunch of guys in that kind of format, just simply from the standpoint, like you have to start throwing 3 or 4 more touchdowns just to make up for those rushing deals for it to even out. Like, and it doesn't make any sense to me at that one. So if you're playing a league like that, I would look at submitting a rule change on that one. Just my 2 cents. But anyway, any other thoughts here on draft strategies?
No, if anybody has any last minute questions, obviously feel free to hit us up on any of the socials. We will, we're keeping a really, really close eye on them here this week, as we know people are drafting and getting into season. But if you have any questions, let us know. We'll help at least provide an opinion, different perspective.
Absolutely. You can find us again, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. And we've been getting a ton of questions coming through the YouTube channel there as well, and we're responding to those guys as well. So if you have a question, you can certainly shoot that over to us on the YouTube channel there as well. Kevin, let's go ahead and hit up and go into some flex fantasy. Man, that's a really good looking video.
I like that video, man.
Every time I see it, I get hyped and want to go on to Flex Fantasy and just start getting things set. So for those of you that didn't check out the episode a couple of weeks ago where we had Will come on from Flex Fantasy, explained everything about how kind of setups and works, but it gives you the chance to import your roster from like Sleeper and Yahoo and be able to play against folks that aren't necessarily in your league and get it up into almost a DFS type of play where you can go on a week-to-week challenge. You can, challenge a whole bunch of different people there. You've got it where you can start putting money on those things there as well. And maybe you don't want to necessarily have your team challenge somebody else's, but you feel like you're really good at being able to look at a lineup, look at somebody else's lineup, and predict which one of those teams is going to win that fantasy matchup there. Well, you can hop in and tell it which one of those is going to bet and which one of those is going to win, and you'll be able to do that on Flex Fantasy. You can find the link to that down in the description on the YouTube channel. We've also got a ton of those things. You can find that video, as a matter of fact, on the Twitter, on TikTok, and on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure we've got it on Facebook there too. So find it on all of our socials there as well, and it's got the link there to sign up there as well. So signing up through that link, you can also help the boys out there as well. Kevin, what did I miss on some Flex Fantasy?
No, I think you covered it. It's a different platform. It's a different opportunity. So they're providing an avenue to play fantasy football like people have not before. And you can challenge different folks. You can post your rosters, as many as you can imagine, right? You can post one roster, you could post 50 if you're in that many different leagues, and let the challenges come in just to kind of see how your team truly stacks up. They're doing a tournament of champions, I believe, right? That we are in once again.
Yep.
And the cool thing about that is Austin Eckler is going to be playing in this tournament of champions with us. So it's going to be cool playing against someone who, literally lives and breathes football, but is also a fan of the fantasy aspect of it as well. So, hop on over, import a couple leagues. You get a chance to challenge us, right? You can challenge the boys, see how your rosters stack up, provide some friendly banter back and forth along the way here. So definitely jump on to flexfantasy.com. Check it out.
Yeah, I want to see a lot of the viewers hop on there, challenge us, and if they pull out the victory at the end of the week, I want to see them in the chat here, just giving us the business here on the live shows. That'll be a lot of fun to interact and be able to do that with you guys. So one other thing too, right now, Flex Fantasy is running a promo where if you hop on there, you sign up. They're doing an Aaron Rodgers giveaway. Signed helmet giveaway, which that is still up and running here for a couple more days. So you do not want to miss that. Hurry up, head over to Flex Fantasy and sign up on that today. You can help the boys out by going to Flex. That's FLEX.FAN/goodoldboysFF. Again, that's FELX.FAN/GOODOLDBOYSFF. So we look forward to seeing everybody over there and rocking and rolling. And Kevin, before we get into our next one, because we're going to start hitting up some of the darlings and the landmines and the my guys, and we've got some mock draft in here at the end. But we got a couple of questions coming in on the YouTube, so we're going to hit those guys up here. And Terry R on YouTube asking, what should I do with Pacheco with Rojo making the team? I'd hang on to him, right? Like you got Pacheco as you got him as a late pick on that one. You didn't really have to spend much capital. Rojo will be there. But CEH, Alex liked pointing out, has yet to have a fully healthy season on this one. So there's a chance that he gets a little bit of run, but I would really watch what this team does over the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you keep him on the roster. If you have him there, you keep him there, right? We've seen the Chiefs implement kind of a 3 running back system in certain ways, whether it's due to injury or efficiency, right? And so I would not expect a whole lot out of Isaiah Pacheco here the first couple weeks. But if you have the roster space and the patience to kind of be able to hold on to him throughout the year, I think you're going to find some value in it, right? Especially as you start getting into bye weeks and as injuries creep up and everything else. So I I don't think there's a reason for you to absolutely, dump him right away. If weeks 1 or 2, if he's the guy on the chopping block because your roster's stacked and, there's someone who flashes that maybe people weren't thinking about, like the Elijah Mitchell of last year. Obviously you toss some fab money out and see how it goes, or waiver priority, however your league works. But don't freak out because Rojo made the roster.
Right. I mean, we looked at it like last year, right? So case in point, a lot of folks freaked out that Rojo and Leonard Fournette were on the same team. And that actually very much depressed Leonard Fournette's ADP last year. Like, he went much later than he should have because Rojo was on the team, and we saw how much that did not affect Leonard Fournette's overall performance there, right? He had an RB1 finish, and you got him well outside kind of top 24 running backs off the board last year. So this is one of those that, again, unless you've got a move that makes a lot more sense, hold tight here with him and just kind of see how this thing plays out there. Terry, and I know that you've been asking a lot of questions on the videos. Very much appreciate you tuning into the live stream and checking out those videos as well. Thanks. All right, another question coming in. This one from Brett over on the YouTube. Couple of questions. Who has a bigger breakout season? Bateman, Lazard, Marquise Hollywood Brown, Zeke, and would you take Josh Jacobs and Diggs for Mixon and Hopkins? He then further clarified that breakout as in exceeds expectations. So who has more exceeding expectations performance between Bateman, Lazard, Brown, and Zeke?
I guess I'm going to exceed expectations. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to rank them Lazard, Hollywood Brown, Bateman, and then Zeke, right? Like, I think Zeke is still being drafted in the top 15 of running backs, right? So I think the expectations are there. He probably has a ceiling of 8 or 9 finish, so there's some upside there. But if he gets injured, or if the Cowboys just kind of fall apart at the seams because their offensive line woes continue, I mean, you could see him kind of bust down into that, 23, 24 level as well. So Lazard first, because Aaron Rodgers has never been able to – I shouldn't say never. Aaron Rodgers does not really like to spread the ball around. He finds his guy and kind of sticks with him. I think the only true exception that I can remember is the very, very end of Jordy Nelson being with the Packers and Devontae Adams kind of emerging as the next guy. So I like Allen Lazard a lot this year. Brown, I think he's extremely relevant for the first 6 weeks. I'm not quite sure how the relevance continues after Nuke gets back from suspension. So there's some things there. And then to kind of jump into the second part, I think I would rather have Mixon and Hopkins than Josh Jacobs and Diggs. And I like Diggs a lot, but I don't like Josh Jacobs at all.
That's fair, right? Like, I've got Joe Mixon ranked as my third running back. I've got Josh Jacobs around 21. I do have him as the 21 running back on my board there. So there's a big difference there as well. And what you're going to make up for that as far as Diggs over Hopkins, because Diggs will play, should play the whole season. He's going to see 160 targets, most likely somewhere in that range. And Hopkins coming back, like, kind of levels the playing field on that one as far as that goes for the last half of the season into a championship run. I probably lean more the Mixon and Hopkins route there than I do the Jacobs and Diggs route, simply from the standpoint that I think you're going to have bigger ceiling towards the end of the season. And just like I got kind of done saying, right, like, it's all done in quarters there. So I see Mixon being, throughout the season. This could be one of those that we see Josh Jacobs start to kind of take it, start to see his role, not necessarily towards the tail end of the season, what it is towards the beginning of the season. I could certainly see that one kind of coming in there to play as well.
Yeah, they got rid of Kenyon Drake because they really like what Zamir White did. Right. And I just don't see Jacobs being the workhorse. Like, he's never really been the workhorse. And so yes, maybe, he's seeing 60% of those running back touches, maybe, but he also has the peaks and valleys where 1 week Jacobs goes off and has 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you think they finally figure it out. And the next week he sees, 12 carries for 65 yards and a dud.
And kind of rank yours. I've got my rankings just slightly different than Kevin's got his as far as the first question goes. I'm factoring in ADP heavily into that one and considering that one there as well. So factoring ADP is part of the equation, right? So the guys that are going later that I see having bigger deals and, that as far as kind of breaking out and exceeding the expectations is how I'm kind of, rating this one. I'm going to go with Lazard. So first, we're the same on that one there. But then I'm going to switch it up and go Bateman, then Hollywood Brown, then Zeke on that one. Bateman is going, a few rounds later than Hollywood Brown is on in drafts right now. And so that has a lot to do with where I'm kind of ranking that one, because Hollywood Brown is a 5th to 6th round pick, whereas Bateman is he's 80th. So I mean you're talking about a round later on that one. So, and I think they're going to end up performing very similarly season long to it. I do think that Marquise Hollywood Brown comes out the gate much stronger and gives you a much stronger first quarter to first half of your fantasy regular season though than what Bateman does.
Yeah, I think the thing that scares me off personally about Bateman is I see a very low ceiling for touchdown potential.
Yes.
And that's just how the Baltimore offense is formulated. It has nothing to do with Bateman's talent. Like, we like Bateman as the player, but when he was drafted last year, right, that fantasy managers all kind of threw their hands up and went, well, crap, because he went to Baltimore. So PPR, yeah, possibly, but I don't know that I see him getting more than 7 or 8 targets a game, as opposed to some of the potential that you can see with Brown specifically. You could see Hollywood get that, but he's big play potential. Bateman's not the big play guy. He's a possession guy. He'll find the seam every once in a while. But if Hollywood Brown sees 7 or 8 targets a game, your opportunity for a 45 to 60 yard catch and run is always a factor with Hollywood Brown. Exactly.
One more question here from Brett before we move on to our darlings segment. Brett asks, with a 10-team PPR of Lamar Jackson, Eckler, Mixon, Keenan, Hopkins, Kittle, Zeke, Lockett, Kmet, Marquise Brown, Lazard, and Bateman, should I make any moves? I'd stand pat on that one. Yeah. I think you're set up for some very good success over the first half of the season there. And then you can start kind of making moves and looking at the waiver wire, making trades if you need to. But there's a lot of really good potential that I see on this one, and a lot of good roster construction on this one.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think you're probably going to be playing around. You're probably going to be playing a little bit more matchup with your flex spot, right? But that's why it's a flex position. Maybe your wide receiver 2 spot some weeks with Hopkins being out. But, I mean, Jackson, Eckler, Mixon, and Keenan Allen to go with Kittle, right? Assuming those were kind of your first picks in that order. Great picks. Like, I have nothing poor to say about any of those guys. Derek and I both like Mixon this year. Eckler's coming off an RB2 performance. I still think he has the potential to finish inside the top 5 again, based off of his touchdown upside and him catching so many passes out of the backfield. So I like the volume of these PPR guys. Lazard, again, Aaron Rodgers likes to fixate on one guy. I think Lazard is that guy this year. So big target share there. And Brown, we just got done talking about. So, Brett, I like your starting lineup. Like, I like how this roster shakes out, and I think you'll be pretty happy with it. And then as the season goes on, just be, able to bob and weave a little bit, right? If Kmet's not the guy, then, find someone who might be the better guy if Case Kittle goes down or on a bye week. Maybe the same thing for Lockett. I'm not a huge lover of Tyler Lockett this year and kind of the dumpster fire that is Seattle quarterbacks. But, I mean, heck, if those are the 2 spots that you're trying to look to adjust, you're better off than most.
just remember what Pete Carroll said. They had 2 QB1s in Seattle not that long ago. So, yeah, we'll just leave that at that.
Anybody who watched that last Seattle preseason game knows that they have 2 QB0s.
Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. We did have one question come in from Twitter. We're going to hit that one up here before we move on. And it was a very difficult one, Kevin. I don't, they're throwing some heat over there at us. But pizza or wings, you can't pick both.
Traditionally, I'm going pizza. I'm just a pizza guy. I understand people's passion for a good chicken wing, right? You can put different type of sauces on it. You can go bone in or boneless, depending on your flavor that day. I understand that. But traditionally, I'm going pizza. That's one of the foods that just makes me happy inside.
Yeah, pizza is one of the go-tos in this household. So one of those when it's can't decide what to do for dinner, the answer is pizza. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts. Pizza is the go-to, and pizza is also I like the phrasing you use, the happy food for me. Yes, I'm gonna stick with pizza as well. So I like it. Alrighty. So guys, again, if you have questions, anything like that, throw them out there. We're happy to answer those, happy to interact with you, happy to do all of that. We did have Brett say, thank you for the input. Definitely going to be a tough decision between Zeke, Lazard, Bateman, week 1 flex position. It may not be as tough as you think. I would look at your matchups there.
Yeah,
and
stay tuned, man. I'll dive into this as we kind of go throughout the episode, so that way I can put my thoughts together. But Brett, if you're willing to stay with us here through the show, I'll get you an answer before we sign off on at least what my thoughts on best upside play is.
Yep. Alrighty, and then two other comments before we move on.
Bring them on.
We had Stacks app. It's the end of draft season, and I'm here for it. Always like those guys over at Stacks chiming in there. Leadership Lessons chiming in. Let's go, boys. Give me those last fantasy nuggets before my draft this weekend. Don't worry, y'all. We got you covered. So, all right, Kevin, it is time for getting into some of these fantasy darlings, fantasy landmines, and the My Guy part of this one. So let's start off with the fantasy darlings, right? And so for everybody out there, as far as how we kind of looked at a fantasy darling, right? A lot of folks would call that sleeper, things like that. And in the past, it typically was that, but everybody's talking so much these days about all these different sleepers that, it's hard to say that there's a sleeper still out there. So when Kevin and I looked at this one, we were putting it together, we really were thinking that more of a case of this is going to be a show and a segment of the show that's going to be 2 guys that have tremendous upside at their ADP and 2 guys that could absolutely smash and outperform their ADP based on where they're going. So that's kind of how we set this one up and we're looking at. So you may see some guys that may even have some middle round type of draft ADP, things like that we're still throwing in here. That's why we think that it's going to have a tremendous upside here on that one. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and lead us off with your number 1 fantasy darling?
So our number 1 fantasy darling is going to be Bobby Trees. Robert Woods for the Tennessee Titans. Treylon Burks is still kind of nursing this injury along, doesn't quite look as great as Tennessee wanted him to be. There's a ton of targets that left town, both from Julio when he was healthy, obviously A.J. Brown, and Robert Woods is still a great route runner. I know he's coming off of a knee injury, but he is a veteran that Ryan Tannehill can depend on. And having him on your roster will allow you a ton of flexibility between your second wide receiver spot, maybe your third wide receiver spot, or a flex position. So I really like Robert Woods. I like the fact that he's going later in drafts. You can pick him up as the team's number 1 wide receiver. You can pick him up in the 10th or 11th round in a lot of different cases. So my first fantasy darling for this season, or for draft season, is going to be Robert Woods.
I like it. I like it a lot. That was like a half of one. I'll chalk it up for a half of one. Alrighty. So my first fantasy darling of this draft season is a guy that we've been high on for a long time, and we have long since pounded the drum here. I'm just going to hop on this bandwagon again that we've kind of been just trying pulling behind us here, trying to make this thing happen. And that's Paris Campbell, right? Paris Campbell right now is coming off the board in the 200s when it comes to an ADP, right? He is going to be on the waiver wire for the vast majority of your leagues out there, right? Now, while Matt Ryan will go out and we've seen him force feed targets to somebody, right? And that's where a lot of the hype is around Michael Pittman on this one, right? We saw the Michael Pittman breakout happen last year with Carson Wentz. I fully expect that to continue this year, but Matt Ryan is going to throw the ball a fair bit, and not every one of those targets can go to Michael Pittman. So I do see Paris Campbell getting a ton of run on this one. He's an electric play kind of guy. He's a huge yak guy that can absolutely catch one and make a guy miss and take one to the house. He's got explosive speed on this one. And Matt Ryan has been last year had one of his lowest ADOTs of his career, right? So he had one of the lowest average depth of targets last year. This actually sets Paris Campbell up for a lot of good things where they can get him on some bubble screens, utilize some of that yak potential, get him out, get him going. But I think that you're also going to see a lot of coverage shift over and really play hard on Michael Pittman, in which case you'll see Paris Campbell a little bit more exposed, playing a little bit easier coverages. And so I do think that you're going to see him be a fantasy darling this year for you. And it would not surprise me to see him well outperform his ADP of 286 right now and wide receiver 90. I can absolutely see him getting up, even in wide receiver 3 territory in this one without too much thought on that one. So huge upside on this guy.
Yeah, I like me some Paris Campbell. I've been on the record, and I continue to say Paris Campbell, coming out, was a better wide receiver than Terry McLaurin, right? I've been on record to say that. McLaurin's been healthy. His statistics have led to a better career thus far, but I still think Paris Campbell is a better overall receiver than Terry McLaurin is, and I'll let all the hate mail be sent towards Derek. So my second fantasy darling, right, for this upcoming season, I'm going back to the wide receiver train. And this time I'm going to look at DJ Chark, right? DJ Chark has been getting tons of hype out of Detroit camp. He is healthy. He looks fast again. He's picked up the offense quickly. Him and Jared Goff have built a nice little rapport. Jameson Williams, not going to be around for the first part of the season, right, as he's recovering from his knee injury that he sustained in the BCS championship game. So DJ Chark is the clear number 2 receiver here at the moment, and he is probably the best deep ball threat that the Lions have right now, because Chark stands at like 6'3" and has like a 6'7" wingspan or something crazy like that. And we've seen him be able to do this before. He's been able to do it in Jacksonville. Yes, he got dinged up the last couple seasons since his breakout sophomore year, I believe it was. But I do think we see a resurgence. And I think DJ Chark is a guy that if you're getting later in drafts, you're trying to fill out your wide receiver room, this is a guy that actually has play. Like, he's not just taking up a spot for you. So he's going to be my second darling here in draft season.
I love it. My second darling is going to be Cole Kmet, right? Not often does a tight end make my list on many things here, but Cole Kmet coming off the board, tight end number 13, and right now he's coming off the board at pick 132 in most cases. So you're talking about a 13th round to a 14th round kind of guy. Kind of fits that definition of late tight end type of guy to take a shot at. He's a guy that, if I miss out on some of those tight ends that I targeted either early or the mid rounds, he's the guy that I'm looking to try and get. Now it's one of those that I could absolutely see him take a big leap forward. Justin Fields has been looking good in the preseason. We've seen, him take a much bigger step forward than I necessarily thought we would have seen just off the preseason here. Looks like the new offensive coordinator is really starting to put some things in that he is really liking. Cole Kmet should be the benefactor of a lot of those things. Chicago has a very, very limited wide receiver room when it's all said and done. So when you look at it, it is Darnell Mooney, and I ran out of wide receivers to name on Chicago. I'm sorry. No, I kid. There's more than that, but you get my point. Darnell Mooney, and then who's the next guy? I think Cole Kmet's actually going to lead the Bears, or actually be the second most targeted player on the Bears this season. And as a tight end, I could see him getting up there at 120 to 130 targets this year. Jimmy Graham is not there to siphon off the touchdowns there. So I see Cole Kmet having huge upside on this one. And the fact that he has the easiest strength of schedule against the tight end only helps the matters. Alrighty. Before we get to our next one, where we're going to start talking about the landmines, one question coming in here from Terry over on YouTube. Thoughts on Zay Jones and Julio? I've been keeping a close eye on both in my full PPR league. Both of those guys are going to be depth pieces there. Zay Jones definitely has a little bit more ceiling play. Julio probably has the safer floor to it. The question is can Tom Brady resurrect Julio Jones? Julio hasn't necessarily looked good the last 2 seasons that we've seen him. This could be one of those that we either see a giant boom on this one, or we've seen primetime Julio is a thing of the past on this one. But that Tampa Bay interior line worries me a lot on that one. What are your thoughts?
I like Julio here. I like Julio. He is a sure-handed veteran. Tom's obviously been reaping praise on Julio in the limited time that Tom has been around the Buccaneers here the last couple weeks. But with Gronk being gone, we kind of touched on this when we did our Tampa Bay breakdown, right? Mm-hmm. With Gronk being gone, I expect Julio to fulfill some of that short yardage inline type mismatch stuff, right? And for different reasons. He's not necessarily as shifty as he used to be, but he has a massive frame, and his catch radius and catch percentage is off the charts. So I like Julio. I think him and Tom are going to connect very well. So if you're keeping an eye on both of them, I would say Julio 1 and then Zay Jones. When in doubt, trust TB12, right? I mean, that is anything we've learned over the last 20 years. When in doubt, trust TB12. And even though he's the third, maybe even the fourth option in that passing offense there in Tampa Bay, I think Julio is going to surprise some people and outperform his ADP.
He may actually be, looking at some of their depth chart and some of the moves they made, he may actually be their second target, first couple of weeks of the season here. Like, Godwin is trending the right way. They're saying lots of positive things, but we don't necessarily know for sure he'll be back. They did cut Tyler Johnson today. Russell Gage has been missing time the last few weeks, and it doesn't necessarily look like he might be back for week 1 there. So you might see a Mike Evans and a Julio Jones as the wide receivers 1 and 2 come week 1 for this Tampa Bay team. So a very real possibility there. I like it. Kevin, you talked me into it. I'm back on Team Julio here. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that he gets to his career high, which is 10 touchdowns, which he had back in 2012. But I don't think anybody would be surprised if Julio ended up with 7 or 8, right? And if he's ended up with 7 or 8 touchdowns, he is squarely in that wide receiver 3 category, like just on touchdowns alone. So he's not a bad stash. I think I like him more in best ball just because then you don't have to worry about timing those games. But I think you see a lot of Julio here to start the season. As they let Godwin come back from injury, as Russell Gage comes back from being nicked up a little bit. I think you're going to see a lot of Julio to help take some pressure off of Tom Brady as he gets used to his newly formed offensive line. So between him and Mike Evans, I like them both.
Yeah, I do too. All righty, let's go ahead and head on over into the landmine candidates. Other people would call these bust guys, but these are going to be the landmine. So when you step on the landmine, not good things happen, and these could be potential landmines in the middle of your draft board here. I'll go ahead and start mine off with one that a lot of people are not going to like here, but that's okay. And I'm calling my shot on the Hunter Renfrow being a landmine here. Right. Like I get that Hunter Renfrow is going late, but if you have been listening to a lot of the Twitterverse and you've been listening to a lot of the experts and a lot of these other guys out there, they are constantly talking about how Hunter Renfrow is going to have a similar type of season when it comes to last year on that one. I think we just saw Hunter Renfrow's career best when it comes to both football and fantasy football output when this thing's all said and done. And this is one of those that I know that on the Hunter Renfrow player profile video, we've had a lot of folks, telling me that I was wrong on that one there, and that's okay. When it's all said and done, though, Hunter Renfrow will be the third most targeted guy on this team. The Raiders, Derek Carr just had his career high pass attempts last year. I don't see that one continuing. I see that coming back down more towards his career average. So we're probably going to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 less pass attempts when it's all said and done. So you're talking about maybe 550 to 570 pass attempts on that. You're going to see Darren Waller and Devontae Adams likely tear up probably about 50% of those targets when it's all said and done. The running backs are going to take another huge chunk of that one, and then you're going to see the rest of the wide receivers sprinkled in there. So it's not going to surprise me to see Hunter Renfrow only end up with at most about 100 targets on this one. And then I had a lot of people tell me that, but his catch rate. Well, Hunter Renfrow's catch rate is what it is because Derek Carr is an accurate thrower of the football, but Hunter Renfrow runs very shallow routes, right? He's that water bug in the slot type of receiver that we've seen constantly. But when you go back and you look at it, him and Darren Waller on the field, the guy that gets the targets is not Hunter Renfrow. It is Darren Waller, who has a slightly deeper average depth of target, has a better yak to it, and Derek Carr throws to more and is the read over Hunter Renfrow in those ones there. So I don't see Hunter Renfrow. I don't see the hype everybody's putting on Hunter Renfrow. Let me put it that way to it. And if you're drafting the hype, he is going to be a landmine in your drafts. That being said, I could see him, you're drafting him at about what I think that you're going to get, which is a wide receiver 3 type of performance this year. But this talk that he's going to be a wide receiver 2 type of candidate, if you're drafting him as your wide receiver 2, you're going to need other options in order to do that because you'll be disappointed when it's all said and done this fantasy football season.
Yeah, absolutely. So my second one, we're going to touch on running backs again. Breece Hall. People need to be careful of Breece Hall. Right now, he's being drafted in the top 24 of running backs, and early reports are, well, I guess I shouldn't say early reports. Most recent reports are Michael Carter is going to be RB1. Now, Breece Hall is going to get a ton of play. So I'm not saying that he's just going to fall off the face of a cliff. I'm saying make sure you draft him in a reasonable spot. Like he is no longer the guy that you want to pick up in the 3rd round, right? Like he is a guy who is probably shifted. You want to look at him maybe in the 5th or 6th round. I don't think he's going to last that long. I think people are going to overdraft him. Therefore, in my remaining leagues, I'm not going to be having any bit of Breece Hall here this season. So, but if you're still drafting, beware, right? Because Michael Carter is going to get more play than a lot of people were expecting or wanting, but that makes sense, right? Saleh coming from the San Francisco offense where they, trot out 4 different running backs every single game, and you just kind of have to guess which one's going to get the hot hand. If Carter can continue to do a lot of the good things that he was last year with an improved offensive line, a better defense behind him, more passing weapons to keep the pressure out of the box, there's a lot to be said that Michael Carter may not have to relinquish that top RB spot, and they might truly be in just a timeshare. And if that's the case, you are overpaying for Breece Hall, and the better value when drafting is Michael Carter.
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. So my second landmine in the drafts, this one, Kevin and I, we were lockstep on last year going into it. We now disagree on this one. So I'm gonna hold fact that I think Saquon Barkley is going to be a landmine out there for you. He's coming off the board now as a top 12 running back. So he's coming off the board as RB12 and half point PPR scoring, kind of right there at the 19th pick. So you're taking middle of the second round when it's all said and done. And Saquon Barkley, couple of things there, right? One, I do think that, we'll see what another year fully removed from that knee injury looks like there. Yeah, he started looking like he had a little bit more of his explosive ability there towards the end of last season. But the problem is that he's still in a bad offense. That Giants offense is just awful. Two, Brian Daboll's has not been, like, when you look at the Brian Daboll offensive system there, it hasn't been necessarily to run the ball a bunch or check the ball down to the running backs a bunch, right? The running backs are there as window dressing a lot of times for that one, far more than they are as locked and loaded, ready to go. Now, there's some things to be said there that he hasn't necessarily had a back of Saquon's capability there as well in any of his previous offenses. But when that's all said and done, you still have to factor in the fact that Daniel Jones is still the quarterback of this team. And where we saw Saquon sparkle and where we saw Saquon really stand out for fantasy purposes was when Eli Manning was the quarterback, and it was check down city to Saquon Barkley, and Saquon saw well over 100 targets that year, and that's the thing that I don't think is going to happen. So for Saquon to be good, he's got to get a bunch of check downs. This offensive line isn't necessarily great. The quarterback isn't necessarily great. The wide receiver room, this organization just has issues all around. So I'm out on Saquon, given that second round pick.
Very good, sir. So I guess, I don't know that we need any honorable mentions. The busts aren't nearly as fun to talk about as the sleepers are, but
did you hit up JK?
Little list there.
Did you hit up your thoughts on JK?
Oh, did I not do JK first?
No, you did Breece Hall first, I thought.
Oh, all right. Here's the next one. J.K. Dobbins. Between coming back from the injury, possibly not being ready for week one, maybe being ready for week one, the signing of Kenyon Drake, the presence of Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards once he comes back, and Dobbins has been starting to fall down draft boards, right? So he is now he's coming off at a bit of a discount. You're getting about 2 rounds later on him now than what you were a couple weeks ago. So it's starting to maybe not quite be that landmine territory based off the value. But nevertheless, there's a lot of people running that ball there in Baltimore. And Dobbins, with not having seen the field yet and maybe not even being ready for week one, be careful about drafting him as your RB2.
I would agree with that. All right, another comment coming in here. Terry saying most definitely people are going crazy about Barkley, but he's still on the Giants and Daniel Jones is QB. Yep, I agree. All righty, so Kevin, let's gonna go ahead and take us into kind of the my guy territory. So every year we kind of come to that spot where we have that my guy, that guy that you cannot, you got to make sure that you leave your drafts with your guy. Who is that guy for you this year? That's one.
Adam Thielen is going to be one of my guys this year if I don't have Justin Jefferson on my roster. Okay, so that is the caveat. But I like Adam Thielen a lot. I do think he bounces back. And this Minnesota offense is going to be a little bit more pass-centric than what we've seen in years past with the changing in coaches and philosophies there. So Adam Thielen has the potential to finish top 15, right? You can absolutely write out a season where he could finish top 15. I've heard other analysts on shows make their flag and that he's going to finish top 10. I think that's a little bullish, but nevertheless, if you're going to make your call, make your call. So Thielen's a guy, I think you get good value, right? You can get him as your third or fourth wide receiver on your team, right? You don't have to spend high draft capital. It's going to be a more of a pass-friendly offense, and we've seen him do it before. And we know that Justin Jefferson's going to see a lot of coverage, right? He's going to see a lot of coverage, and I think Justin Jefferson is the number one receiver in fantasy this year. But I think that this offense can support 2 top 15 wide receivers. So Adam Thielen, if Jefferson's not on my roster, is a guy that I'm absolutely targeting to help balance my wide receiver room.
I like it. I do have a question for you on that one, though. Over under 10 touchdowns for Thielen.
Under. I think 8's a number that I'm really happy with. I don't think it gets to 10. Yeah, so under. I'm thinking more 8.5 would have been a really hard number for me to choke down, right? But
okay,
I'm good with 8.
Fair enough. I just, those guys that are planting the flag at a top 10, like I don't know that there's a world that Adam Thielen gets that high without double-digit touchdowns. But
yeah, I think that one's a little hard, right? Like they have some passing weapons, right? They have Irv Smith, trying to cement himself as the tight end that we thought he was going to be a couple of years ago when coming out of Alabama. Obviously, Jefferson sees a ton of run, and you can't forget about Dalvin Cook, right? So a lot of offensive weapons. I think 10's a reach, though. I wouldn't be willing to put money on that.
Okay. All right, I like it. So my guy, I have 2 coming into this one, right? Like I couldn't get off of this one because I've been, pounding the table for 2 guys this off season here, especially the last probably 2 months on this one. Damien Pierce, who was a guy that, a couple months ago, I you and I were talking on some of these drafts going through, and I was saying, this is a guy that we need to get because the value is just too great. I think he'll be the RB1 for the Houston Texans before the season's over. Like he is going to get the starting job before the season's over. Turns out he got it before the season started on that one there. And I do think that he's going to get a ton of work. And I do think that he has a ton of upside. I think that he'll be a top 24 back when this thing's all said and done.
Tons of comparisons to Arian Foster.
Yep.
Right. And Arian Foster did a hell of a job as an undrafted rookie coming out of Tennessee for Houston. The injuries got him. But if that's where the comparisons are, the short sample size spells really good things for them to be able to make that name drop.
Yes, I was loving the fact that I could pick him up in the 10th, 11th, or 12th round all summer long, and now all of a sudden when we're getting like right up here against it, I'm having to start really, and that is creeping up into the 8th, 7th, even the 6th I've started to see, and it is getting really tough to be able to take my guy there on that one. The other guy is another guy whose draft stock has rocketed up the board recently, right? Again, I started telling y'all when we started doing the team breakdowns that I thought Travis Etienne would be a guy that would have a top 10 running back finish when this thing's all said and done. Love the fact that, throughout the summer was able to draft him with the 6th or 7th round pick. And now he firmly is gone before the 5th every single time. So he's a 3rd, 4th round pick in a lot of cases there. But that's a guy that I think has a ton of upside and will absolutely make some things happen there. So, unfortunately, my guys this year, everybody else had caught on to him and really seemed to have, calling their shots along with my guys there.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you said, this is something that we had been talking about. So this is not bandwagon jumping by any stretch. We've been on this for the last, 45, 60 days telling everyone to grab this. We have tons of rosters where Derek and I have done drafts where either him or I have Damien Pierce at a very nice bargain now.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm going to do now in these next few drafts, kind of figuring out where he's going. In the one I'm in the middle of now, I just picked him up in the 7th. Right. And I feel good about it because I went wide receiver heavy. So, I feel good about that. But still, it's a lot different than picking him up in the 11th from a couple weeks back.
Right. And that was one of the things like early in the summer, right? We were talking strategies early in the summer. I was very comfortable going with a lot of zero RB type of strategies where I would get a quarterback early, a tight end early, because I felt incredibly comfortable picking up guys like Travis Etienne, Damien Pierce, and a couple of these other guys that had just tremendous value at the running back position. But that is the case of fantasy. So Terry R coming in saying that my guys are Kirk Cousins, Rashad Penny, and Khalil Herbert. I can definitely get behind the first two. I don't think I like Khalil Herbert for Dynasty. I don't necessarily like him for redraft this year. I think you will see old Monty get the bulk of the workload there in Chicago. Monty looking pretty fresh and good there. So I think Khalil Herbert will see it, but it's going to be a spell back. He's not going to be a guy that sees enough workload to give you fantasy relevance there, unfortunately. Absolutely. Next year, that could be a different story.
Right. Is Brett still with us?
Brett, are you still there? If you're still there, go ahead and chime in on the comments there, and we'll get you an answer for your flex position. While we're waiting for Brent, one of the other things to check out there, the boys, you don't want to go into your fantasy season without the trophy, right? Like that's one of the things that you play for is cash and trophies. And one of the centerpieces to any winning strategy there is to get the trophy. And you can do that with Trophy Smack. You can find the link down in the description on the YouTube there. Go on there, order your league trophy. One of the things we really like doing is having a perpetual type of trophy and having it where you've got multiple years on there, and the winner's able to take the trophy, and kind of like the Stanley Cup where winner keeps the trophy and then the next year has to turn it over at the to the next person there. So fantasy or Trophy Smacks got you covered on that. You can find the link on that one down in the description on YouTube there. So make sure you're checking that one out there as well, guys. So Kevin, I'm going to say that Brett is not in the chat there any longer, but real quick, why don't you throw it out there for everybody curious? Tough decision week 1 to put in the flex between Zeke, Lazard, Bateman. Who you got?
By deduction, right? I'm not going Zeke because they're playing Tampa Bay, right? Zeke was terrible week 1 against Tampa Bay. We saw that game plan where he stayed in and did an amazing job blocking, right? It wasn't that Zeke had a bad game. He had a bad fantasy output. I think they're going to see more of that, right? I think that Tampa Bay is going to be coming after him again, and we could see a lot of Zeke Elliott pass protecting while Tony Pollard's the one who actually gets some run out of the backfield. So for me, it is Allen Lazard here in week 1 going up against Minnesota. I want to put this defense to the test, see how it's going. So if I'm running a flex spot in week 1, I am going to take Lazard in my flex position.
I like it. I will yeah, I like that. I'll jump on that one with you. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and real quick, we're going to hit up the a draft that we ran through last night, little mock draft, single QB, give folks kind of a chance to kind of look and see, some of the stuff we were talking about as far as some of these strategies go, some of this, that, the other kind of go there. So, Kevin, when we were talking through that thing, right, like we'll just kind of run through our rosters here and kind of talk through that one there is kind of, why you constructed it the way that you did. And I'll go ahead and start here. I went with Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill, Mark Andrews, J.K. Dobbins, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Tom Brady, Rashad Penny, Robert Woods, Justin Tucker, the Broncos defense, and Julio Jones with my last pick there. So kind of walking through it, right, wanted to start off with a running back that I knew was going to get a ton of run. Very few running backs are utilized as heavily as Derrick Henry. When I was coming back through, I was looking at the board, looking at that thing going, man, I like going running back here in the second round. But the value was really good as far as the wide receivers went. This is kind of where the tiers took over again there, simply from the standpoint that Tyreek Hill was in a better tier for my running back for my wide receivers than what the running backs were on that one. Like this was my 4th, 5th type of tier in a lot of cases for the running backs, whereas Tyreek Hill was in the 2nd tier for me. Mark Andrews was able to get my 1st tier tight end there on the comeback through it. And this was one that I really kind of let the board get away from me a little bit when I went from the 3rd into the 4th. Really, Really would have liked ETN or Montgomery to make it back to me, and thought that it might have with what was on the tail end there. It certainly didn't happen. That left me into a J.K. Dobbins there, which, not bad. I think J.K. will have some great value towards the second half of the season, but not overly happy having to start with him as my RB2 on this one. Then rolling with the DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin. Again, felt like the value was there. Took best player available when it came to it. Tom Brady, I've got him as my third quarterback, ranked finish on this one. Had to go with it. Plus, it allowed me to stack up Chris Godwin there as well. Rashad Penny got down here. Realized that I still had a little bit of a hole up there when it came to RB2 on this one. Rashad Penny allows me to fill that in very, very nicely with a discount there and an RB2 until J.K. Dobbins fully back. Robert Woods, again, picking up some great value there. Kicker, defense, got ahead of the runs there a little bit on that one. And then Julio Jones sitting down there at the last pick. Felt like there was a ton of ceiling, ton of floor, and just a great overall dart throw on my last pick there.
Yep, I would absolutely agree. There's nothing wrong with Julio in the 12th, right? So I was picking from the 7 hole. So quick breakdown: Mixon, Barkley, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Cooks, Schultz, Bateman, Damien Pierce, James Cook, Derek Carr, and then Matt Gay and the Patriots defense is kind of how this little mock went for us. So to start off, I thought I was going to get Jefferson. Like, I really thought that, the way that this thing was going to shake down, that, okay, the run on running backs was going to continue. And I was going to start with Jefferson and then start building my team around him. He went right in front of me. Again, didn't freak out about it. I had a nice little pivot. Derek and I both really liked Joe Mixon this year, so I was happy to get Joe Mixon in the 7th. And then as things kind of came around, a lot of actually, it's pretty balanced, right, between my pick at 7 and then my pick at the 2-6. So grabbed Saquon Barkley as the 12th running back off the board. I feel pretty comfortable with Saquon in this spot. So he's going to have to be the workhorse focal point of the ground game. He's going to see some passes his way from Daniel Jones, spread offense. So there shouldn't be so much ground and pound wear and tear on Saquon based off of how this offensive philosophy is going to fly. So I do like that a bit more. Coming back into the 3rd, I knew I was going to start. I knew I had to start pounding wide receivers. So I took A.J. Brown. I am really starting to buy into the hype coming out of Philadelphia, right? So I passed on guys like T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman, and I took A.J. Brown for the upside play there in Philadelphia. Followed that back up in the 4th with Terry McLaurin. So I feel pretty comfortable with the balance there. In the 5th, I doubled down, tripled down. Again, took Brandon Cooks, another guy who is a target monster there in Houston. Love the value and the ability that I'm going to have with those as my top 3 wide receivers to kind of be able to move in and out of that wide receiver position on my roster. And then the 6th, I grabbed Dalton Schultz. I felt like he was kind of at the tail end of where my tiers are. Right after him, TJ Hawkinson went, which a lot of people could make an argument for. But I like the fact that the Cowboys are going to have to throw the ball a lot, and no one really knows what they're doing in the wide receiver room after CeeDee Lamb. So I expect Schultz to see a ton of run. After that, in the 7th, Bateman. Again, another number 1 wide receiver on a team. Got him in the 7th. Touchdown upside, I'm not sure is there, but I do think he can be a PPR monster for us. Damien Pierce in the 8th. Love that pick. Obviously, the news that we got today just cements that even more. So now I have what I feel like is a really strong 3-headed running back approach to most weeks. James Cook right after that. I like the run and being on that high-powered Buffalo team. That's never a bad thing. Derek Carr as quarterback there in the 10th. I was very happy with this. I was very happy with Derek Carr in the 10th. I think they're going to be throwing the ball a ton in Vegas. Between Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow. So that kind of rounded out all the skill positions. And then kicker, and then the Patriots defense. Like, it's kind of one of those things. The Patriots defense is always going to be good for fantasy. They find ways to produce points for their offense. So I went ahead and snagged him up there in the last round of the draft.
I like it. I like that one a lot. Now, when I was sitting there in the and take the Tom Brady one, I was sitting there looking at that, going, "Man, I could go Tom Brady, I could go Damien Pierce," but I was like, I feel because I had a heart. I really didn't believe that I would have both of them fall back. If I let them pass, 'cause I felt like you'd gobble one, if not both of them up, and so I took my shot on Tom Brady there, and I've got to ask, would Tom Brady have made it back to me in the 8th?
I think he would have gotten by me. Like, I was pretty comfortable with how the quarterback board was set up at that moment, that I didn't feel like I needed to force myself into a quarterback. So he would have gotten by me. I don't know, what some of the other formulations would have done, right? Like, instead of Dak was the only quarterback that went between your pick in the 7th and then your pick in the 8th. So, there's a possibility that you might have had Dak instead of Brady if that's what you wanted. But
Right.
I was really content on not needing a quarterback in the 7th round.
Fair enough. That was the one that I sat there when I kept looking at that thing. I was on the clock staring down Brady or Pierce because I really didn't believe I'd get both of them back to me. And so I took the shot on the Brady and hoping that the other ones would sneak by me, and it just didn't. So
Yeah, and I had a couple running backs kind of flagged in that spot there where Pierce went. So I think I was looking running back in that position, right, to balance out the Saquon and Joe Mixon thing to help hedge myself from injuries. So there's a good chance I probably could have pivoted to like a Ramondre Stevenson or Damien Harris, right, if he was going to be there based off of how things fell. So for this exercise, I'd tell you, yeah, he would have gotten by me both times, and I would have let you pick him up in the 8th.
okay. Well, lesson learned, I guess. Lesson learned. So, alrighty. Well, that'll.
You can jive. Maybe I don't do that in the home league.
Oh, yeah. It's the home league is a Superflex, so that the Superflex does bring a whole other strategy into play there. Speaking of which, do we want to show the viewers out there Superflex?
Yeah, we could run through one real quick. I mean, this only takes 5 minutes. So
yep. All right, go ahead and hit up your sleeper there.
I'm getting in it right now.
So for everybody out there watching, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rock and roll through another draft here, and we'll go ahead and bring that up where we show you guys how we would run through a super flex.
All right. You're
that
taking 10?
Yeah, I was going to take 10, get down there towards the end of the draft.
All right, I'll jump on the front half. That's fine.
All righty. So I'll kind of switch things up. I took the front half last time. You took the tail end there. So we'll reverse around here. Let me get this screen set up so it's not. All righty, there we go. Now everybody will be able to see what we've got cooking here. All righty, let's go ahead and start this draft off here.
Love Josh Allen out there. That's great.
Alrighty, so looking at it, we've got Herbert, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Patrick Mahomes, Cooper Kupp, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, all off the board. And it gets to me down here in the 10th. And you know what? I've got a guy named Derrick Henry right here that we'll go ahead and take. Alrighty, so things move around where I've got Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Jamar Chase, Dalvin Cook, back to me here. And we're going to go ahead and, again, continue to kind of pivot here a little bit and, move and groove here. And we'll go ahead and take a QB here, and we're going to take Mr. Tom Brady.
All right. So let's see. You took Brady, so then Burrow, Dak, Najee, Mixon, Kelsey, Adams. So because I have Josh Allen and I have a premium top quarterback, I'm not going to force it and go double quarterback here. So then it's just trying to make up my mind on how I would like the rest of my roster configured. At the moment, I think I'm liking the running back room here. I think I'm going to see how this is going to shake out with DeAndre Swift as my number one back. After Swift, Russell, Mark Andrews, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb. So there's not many receivers off the board here, right? So there's still some value in at receiver. Being at the front end of the draft, I have to be cautious because there's a big time gap between where I'm drafting now and what's going to be off the board by the time it gets back to me. So I'm going to think on this for half a second because right now Debo, we're looking at like Debo, Tyreek, Mike Evans. Those are all great options. If I wanted to double up here on running back, Chubbs, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Javonte Williams. I think I'm digging on the wide receivers here at the moment. So I think I'm going to grab me a wide receiver that can play some running back too in Debo.
There you go. Get a dual position guy. I like it. Alrighty, so things actually fell to me the way that I was hoping when you were talking through it. I was hoping that Alvin Kamara would make his way to me, and he does. So I'm going to go ahead and take old AK here. All right, and then after AK, Kyle Pitts, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Leonard Fournette all kind of come off the board there. And that leads me down here to the point where now you got to start kind of looking at some things here and how do you want this thing to play out. And I'm going to do something different than what I've done a lot. A guy that I haven't really taken much here, but I'm going to try it out here. I'm going to go with a Michael Pittman to be my wide receiver 1.
All right, so Pittman went, followed by Javonte, Zeke Elliott, James Conner, Kittle, and Breece Hall, then T. Higgins. So at the moment, I'm fairly balanced here. I'm kind of seeing what's shaking around. We were talking about this guy earlier, and I'm going to have 2 big-time pass-catching running backs to help my PPR standpoint because I'm going to pick up ETN right here. All right, so ETN went, followed by Keenan Allen, Antonio Gibson, DK Metcalf, and Darren Waller. Again, we're still pretty balanced. We like the way this thing looks. And here's a guy that I don't have a whole lot of this season, but I'm going to take a flyer here as my second wide receiver because I like the upside he provides. A target monster there in Carolina. I'm going to take DJ Moore.
I like it. That was another one I was hoping kind of fell back my way, but alrighty. So after DJ Moore, it's Cam Akers, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Dalton Schultz, David Montgomery. And this is one that, again, when you were going through that, Monty was a guy that was hopeful would make his way back here and really just kind of load up and go wide receiver or go running back heavy to start here. But that was not the case and not the way things are going to shake out for me. So I'm going to go with another guy that I see having a bunch of upside here for this year and a guy that we've been high on all year long, and that's going to be Courtland Sutton with the addition of Russell Wilson. Then you got Elijah Mitchell, Josh Jacobs, TJ Hawkinson, Mike Williams all go, and that puts me back on the clock. Now, as far as this thing kind of goes, right, the roster construct would be for a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, a kicker, defense, super flex type of thing here. And so, when we're shaking this thing out here, now it's the question of, do you really kind of go after and do you go get your second quarterback here after kind of filling some skill positions, or do you keep kind of catching some of the value out there on where it is? Because there is still quite a bit of value when it's all said and done here on this board. And I think I'm going to go ahead and keep kind of plugging away here. Dallas Goddard is a guy that, from a tiers perspective, is a guy that I have ahead of a lot of the tight ends already off the board. And so I'm going to go ahead and take Dallas Goddard.
All right. So Goddard went Judy, Marquise Hollywood Brown, J.K. Dobbins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Edwards, and Dillon. All right, so here's the position, thinking the same thing as Derek. And so, again, I have Josh Allen. He's a premium QB1 caliber guy, but the run is coming soon. Because I'm on the end, I feel like that even if the two teams after me pick a quarterback, there's enough around that I am still comfortable. So this goes off of reading the room, like what we were talking about earlier. And at the moment, this is based off of new information and everything that we have. Right here is where I'm thinking Damien Pierce here, Derek.
You would do that. You would do that.
Well, like I said,
I had just queued him up.
Yeah, new information because of everybody being cut, and with him being the third running back on my team, I can absorb it. Here we go. All right. This falls even better. Still no quarterbacks have been taken. And so now is when you can kind of dictate the run, right? There's a big, long space of players drafting after you. And so I'm going to forego any other flex position or trying to make out of that. And so now I'm going off of quarterbacks here. Question is, we got Trey Lance, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins are kind of the top names on the board here. I'm going to go with Trey Lance this time because I want to see how it looks, and I like the fact that I can pair him up with Debo. So I'm going to do things a bit different and go Trey Lance here.
I like it. Alrighty, so after Trey Lance, Juju, Allen Robinson, Gabe Davis, Chris Godwin, Darnell Mooney, Devontae Smith all go. And really you saw kind of a little wide receiver run happen there. And a lot of guys that I actually had kind of queued up for this pick went, Allen Robinson was a guy I was targeting here. Darnell Mooney was a guy I was targeting here. But there's still a wide receiver here that I think I can target and really kind of benefit from here. And a guy that, I think there's going to be some tremendous value when it's all said and done. I'm going to take Michael Thomas here. See if we can't get back to what he was a few years ago, even a shadow of himself. DeAndre Hopkins, Tony Pollard goes, Rashad Bateman, Miles Sanders. That puts me back on the clock here. And there's some things here that I'm going to do something that I normally wouldn't do, right? Like I've got Tom Brady to be my very safe floor quarterback here. And there's some things here that normally I would be looking more at a Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, but I'm going to go with some more upside here for my Superflex, and I'm going to take a Justin Fields.
All right, so Fields goes. Then we get a couple rookies and Drake London and Treylon Burks, Elijah Moore, Hunter Renfrow, Adam Thielen. I knew I was going to be close. I just missed my guy. But that's okay. Then Dawson Knox. So as we're here, still kind of going through the board, it's still fairly balanced. I'm not freaking out about anything, but getting here into the eighth round, I have some decisions to make. I'm looking over at tight ends, and I don't think I'm ready to pull the trigger there. It's at a different tier here than what I'm looking at currently. So I'm going to go back to the well here just a little bit. And I'm going to grab Allen Lazard, a guy I think is going to have an amazing season. Wow, big running back run after that. Yep. Singletary, Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, and Rashad Penny. So then going back to what we have available here, I am looking at Ramondre Stevenson right here, seeing if that does anything for me. I'm going back into the wide receiver room. And so now I'm not loving anything at this value, right? This is where you're struggling. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to fill up my tight end position because I like what Ertz can do.
And there's the QB run. So right there, right? Like this is one of those that Kevin preached this early on in the deal where you need to know the room. You need to be able to read it, right? Because you want to get ahead of runs on some of these cases. You don't want to reach, but you want to be at the beginning of some of those runs, not at the tail end and not chasing the run to it. So Kevin, looks like we both kind of got our guy when it came down to the quarterback run here before it happened. So Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Ryan, Mac Jones, all coming off the board here. And yeah, that leads back to me. And I'm looking at this thing going, man, I do want to get a little bit more roster balance on this one. And there's a running back out there that I really, really like, kind of in this range here. And that's going to be a Ramondre Stevenson. One, he's an Oklahoma Sooner, but two, it looks, if Ty Montgomery's not able to really go out there in New England, you're going to see Ramondre Stevenson likely filling in a lot of the third down role and pass catching work, but you'll also see him get a lot of 1-2 punch with Damien Pierce, and we saw a lot of that play out last year. So I like a lot of upside for a running back drafted in the 9th round there. Then you have Tannehill, Jameis Winston, Cordell Patterson, Brandon Ayuk go, and yeah, this is one of those that you're definitely starting to kind of stare down some of these things, really with what's left on the board here. And for me, I'm going to go back to the well on running back, and I'm going to pick up another guy that I think has a lot of upside, especially if there's some injury there. And I'm going to go with Darrell Henderson.
I like that Henderson pick. So Henderson went at Pat Freiermuth, James Cook, Mike Gesicki, Chris Olave, Tyler Lockett, Garrett Wilson, and now I am back on the clock. So here's something that I'm looking at a little differently. Do we look at defense? Do we look at kickers? I think this is something where I like the way my roster's balanced here at the moment. So now I'm going to go out and I'm just going to get the best kicker in the NFL. And I'm going to take that.
I like it.
See, and so Tucker went, Robert Woods, Christian Kirk, and then we got on the defense train, right? Tampa Bay, Buffalo Bills. So if we're seeing what's out there, kind of eyeing the room a little bit, man, oh man, we have some Rams, we have some Niners, but we got a lot of good defenses here that I think are going to provide good insight here throughout the rest of the year. So we're going to take another peek at what is left on the big board. Claypool, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Michael Carter, guy that we were talking about who's going to be the number 1 back in New York.
Right. No, I really like that Michael Carter pick. That's a nice one there. And so I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this, and really I've got 2 roster positions left to fill out, right? I either got to take my kicker or I got to take my defense here. Obviously, we're still in the earlier picks when it comes to kickers, and there's probably some more benefit. There's probably some better benefit for me going with the kicker than going with defense, especially on kind of this short term. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and go with the kicker, and we're going to go ahead and go with the kicker out of Buffalo there. Take the team that should score a lot of points.
Tyler Bass.
And then you've got Carlson go, the Cowboys go, Butker go, the Colts go. And that leads me back into my last pick. And I'm sitting here staring down. And really, I could go one of 2 ways on this one. But I'm going to go with the Patriots defense here. It usually means a good thing for fantasy.
All right. Patriots went. Then the Saints, Matt Prater, Ravens defense, Nick Folk, Younghoe Koo, and then Rodrigo Blankenship, my boy out of Georgia. So we're left here. Still got defenses left to pick from. Broncos, Steelers are kind of the top 2 options right here. At the moment, I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. I think that they have to generate a lot of points, a lot of turnovers on defense to keep this offense relevant right now. So I'm going to take Pittsburgh as my defense.
I like it. And then Suckup and McManus complete it there. So some thoughts here. What kind of stood out to you? What kind of shocked you? What kind of surprised you? Some of those types of things when it came to this draft.
I think first and foremost, the second round of quarterbacks probably was delayed a lot more than what you see in most Superflex drafts. So
Yes.
I think it led to some different roster turnouts than what a lot of people experience. But that being said, we played the draft board that was handed to us, and this is what we're looking at. So I really like my running back room for not having a premium like number one type guy when you're thinking of Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. I still really like my room. Pass catchers of DeAndre Swift and Travis Etienne. You have this kind of high buzz rookie and Damien Pierce coming into Houston with no real competition behind him. And then Michael Carter to round that out, a guy who at least is going to split time and at best is going to kind of have that 55-45 edge in a lot of different situations for the Jets. So I really like my wide receiver room. I feel like I'm light, or my running back room, excuse me. I feel like I'm light on wide receiver personally, but it's only 12 rounds, right? Like most of these drafts are 16. So there's a couple more wide receivers sprinkled in. And the three guys that I have, I like. They're number one options on teams. Debo has a little bit of rushing upside behind him. DJ Moore and Baker Mayfield seem to have been connecting already. The reports out of Carolina are very positive towards that. And Allen Lazard. I think this is Aaron Rodgers' guy. So I'll plant my flag there and take a gamble on him.
I like it. Yeah, it's kind of similar thoughts there, right? Like I was very happy with the fact that I was able to go out and get two, high-powered running backs on this one and be able to put them on my roster. My wide receiver room, maybe would have liked a little bit more star power kind of out the gate on that one, but definitely some upside here on these guys and guys that are going to be the first options on their team there. And really just kind of like the overall construct of this one. Terry saying the steal of the draft was Michael Thomas. I appreciate that one there. I think Michael Carter, probably the steal of the draft, or like that was probably the one that stood out to me. And kudos to you for remembering him and going and getting him. Last question coming in from Terry. Current backup is Freiermuth. Should I drop him for Irv Smith? My QB is Cousins. No, you should not. I would stand pat on that one. If you've got the roster space to add Irv Smith, he's worth an add there, but we're not for sure that he's going to be back week 1 yet. He's still coming off of that thumb injury there. Freiermuth is locked and loaded, ready to go week 1. And to borrow a phrase that Alex loves, the best friend a quarterback has is a safety blanket in a tight end. And Pat Freiermuth could certainly be that for either Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky there. Well, and Mitch Trubisky in Chicago like to target the tight ends. So I would hold Pat with Pat Freiermuth. You see what I did there?
Yep, I see what you did there. Cosign. I got to see that Irv Smith can stay healthy and that he's actually going to be relevant. We think that he will in this offense, but there's no signs of it. We know Pat Freiermuth is going to be a focal point in this passing game offense. The offensive line is still shaky. You need guys who can run some shorter routes and big body guys who can grab that ball in short yardage and be able to lean forward. Freiermuth is that guy for the Steelers here at the moment. So I would stand pat. Again, like Derek said, I would stand pat with Pat Freiermuth.
I like it. And there's a good chance Pat Freiermuth may end up being the second most targeted guy on that offense to start the season, right? Like I think
as the first 4 or 5 weeks, possibly you could see that.
I think Pickens overtakes that and becomes season end finishes hotter than that one. But I think Deontay Johnson is going to be the number one targeted guy. But through the first roughly probably 4 to 6 weeks of the season, I could see Pat Freiermuth being the second most targeted guy on this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So yeah, I would certainly stand pat with Pat Freiermuth. I love how that rolls off. That's so fun. All righty. So Kevin, I do believe that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
I guess first and foremost, thank you guys for tuning in, for checking out all the content on YouTube, all the player profiles. It's fun to do. It's just as much fun to see that you guys are getting enjoyment or benefit out of those. Other than that, happy drafting, right? We're down to it. We're coming up on the 11th hour, not quite the witching hour, but the 11th hour, as we get through the last weekend of drafts and probably the biggest weekend of drafts in our industry. Hit us up with questions if you guys come across challenges like that. Like, it was pretty straightforward in that draft we just did. We can be able to make a couple comparisons, maybe help decide a tiebreaker, right? If you're just hung up on somebody, hit us up. We're happy to help.
Absolutely. And we've been trying to respond to all the questions and comments coming in there, and trying to get to those as quickly as we can. So appreciate you guys throwing them in there. A lot of fun. Make sure that you're hitting us up on the socials: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, at Good Old Boys FF. And again, one of the best ways to support this independent podcast is to head over to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, and we've got all of the videos out there, those player profile videos, those little 2 to 5 minute quick hitter videos where you can check out our thoughts on certain players, where we think that they're going to kind of go, how things are going to play out there. I spent a ton of time over the summer putting those all together for y'all. And so very much appreciate you guys taking a look at those, and happy to help you guys out when it comes to draft season here. And again, do not forget to head over to Flex Fantasy. The link is in the description down there in YouTube, and sign up. Because right now, if you sign up, you still can get entered into that Aaron Rodgers signed helmet jersey and challenge us. I'm sorry, Aaron Rodgers signed helmet, not signed helmet jersey. Got it. All right, Aaron Rodgers signed helmet over there on Flex Fantasy. Make sure that you sign up and use the link down in the description on the YouTube channel. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Alex will be back next week. Have a good one. Be safe.